The comments heard on The View From A Pew are those of Mac McKoy and are not necessarily the opinions of his guests, his producer Garth, any one particular denomination or religion, the church lady, Mr. Lemke, Pastor Craig, or anyone else of sound mind and body. Now here is today's The View From A Pew, heard all around the world on YouTube. Just search for The View From A Pew.
And thank you, Emily. You notice she says on there of sound, mind, and body. I think I'm okay on the body, but I'm not sure I'm sound in the mind. Welcome to Monday here on your local radio station. My name is Mac McKoy. My co-host is Delmar Austin. And this is The View From A Pew. Celebrating our, what would this be? This would be our 17th anniversary this July, so last month, of View From A Pew. And we love it. We hope you do too. It's a simple deal. We're not political. We talk about things of theology. We try not to agree much because two people who always agree makes one of us not necessary. And I always get voted the unnecessary one. I don't know how that works. But Delmar Austin is here. He's our co-host. And for the next couple of weeks, and we kind of do this, we take the question, what does the Bible say about blank? And today we're going to, or the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about music. Now, hang on, because the good news is that Delmar and I have, we're not opposite, but we do have different places that we get our music from. You're going to talk a lot about hymns and things like that.
Religious music.
Yeah, I'm religious music.
Okay, spiritual music, hymns, songs, all the spectrum that has to do with music that's composed for religious reasons.
All right, and you know many of the older hymns and things like that, and I'm more up on, I'm a gospel guy. I love gospel quartets and that kind of thing. Yes. Love the Gaither Brothers, that type of stuff. And then I also enjoy folk music.
Yes.
Which becomes kind of a religious thing or based on a belief. In fact, we had a couple at the church like a year ago, a man and wife.
Yes.
They did a great job. They had, I would say it was kind of folk musical.
Actually, Mac, you may be surprised, but we are very similar.
Oh, we are?
It sounds like in our musical tastes.
Okay, what's your favorite Mercy Me song? You don't even know who Mercy Me is.
I do know who Mercy Me is, but I
okay.
can't think of one off the top of my head.
Well, I'm going to be 1 point ahead. I can tell you my favorite hymn.
Okay.
Stand up for Jesus.
Well, I can't really tell people what my favorite hymn is because I got so much music that I love.
We have an admission here of guilt coming down from Pastor. That's all right. All right, so today's show, we're just kind of introducing kind of the vision that we have on this music and what this program is going to be like here for the next couple of weeks. So go ahead there, Pastor.
Well, I just want to start with my experience. I am a retired pastor. I was in pastoral work for over 40 years, and so I think I know a little bit about how churches work and what values and things are important to them. And in regards to music, I've been very involved in the life of my churches in connection with music.
Yeah.
I mean, at my churches, we've had cantata programs, which were always kind of a big thing. We do that at Christmas time or at Easter. I've been involved in church choirs. I've had a hand in praise team preparation and the work, the leading of music that they do there. So I think I'm fairly experienced, although I'm not particularly musically talented.
Yeah, we found that out last Sabbath when you said you were going to play a horn, and it sounded like a cow dying after, hemorrhaging or something.
Well, that was a bugle, and of course, there's not much to...
But it sounded like this. I mean, that's what it was.
That is true.
Or cows dying.
That's about the only sound it makes, too.
Okay. Yeah, and by the way, if you're listening, we're not going to play a lot of the music. I mean, that's not what we do here. We talk about theology, so we may play a couple two snippets of songs, but otherwise, we're going to talk about. Quite frankly, if I had a survey, I would say that music would be top 3 or 4 things that people talk about with church.
Yes, yes, they do.
Man.
Music means a lot to people. But because of that, because music is so powerful, it's so inspiring to so many people, that there also is a lot of conflict over music sometimes in a church. And I say sometimes, everywhere I've been, there's been some conflict over music as to what is appropriate for church music, and also what kind of styles are fitting for us to use. And people come from all sorts of different backgrounds. The way that I approach a lot of music, and we'll talk about this as the next 2 weeks are involved here, but the way I approach music is a lot like art. There are many different forms of art that are out there. I like some forms of art better than other forms, but I like art. We need to start again.
The comments heard on The View from a Pew are those of Mac McKoy and are not necessarily the opinions of his guests, his producer Garth, any one particular denomination or religion, the church lady, Mr. Lemke, Pastor Craig, or anyone else of sound mind and body. Now, here is today's The View from a Pew, heard all around the world on YouTube. Just search for The View from a Pew.
And thank you, Emily. It's a Monday here on The View from a Pew, and we thank you for joining us. My co-host, Pastor Delmar Austin, is in the house, and for the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about one of the most decisive things in church. And no, it's not race. It's not standing or kneeling. It's not baptism, sprinkle, or dunk. It's music.
Music is inspiring to so many people.
Me, I mean, I love music. And we're kind of from the same genre. We were talking earlier, and we've got some differences. I can name a hymn, and you can't name a Mercy Me song. So, I don't know. Stand up for Jesus. They're going to play that at my funeral.
Well, that's
Seriously.
a good hymn to use. There are so many great hymns, and we're going to talk about this in the next couple of weeks, but there's so many great traditional hymns. But the spectrum of religious music is so much wider than that. It's so much bigger, and so that's what we want to talk about, because music is important to people. It is important to religious people. It's important to the whole world. And so what happens in church, what happens in religious life, I think is very important. We think about it, and we realize the fact that the Bible has a lot to say about music.
Yeah, and that's how I can't understand sometimes when different denominations or different pastors or different churches just want to play down the music, and drums seem to be the biggest problem.
Yes.
And yet bongos have been around since the beginning of the letter B. But anyway, we'll talk about that.
Well, I brought my tambourine
I see
today.
you brought that. I'm so excited.
Well, you gave me a lead-in for that because even though there's some controversy, of course, over drums, the people of God who have played music, practiced music, have always had instruments of rhythm. And that's what a drum is. That's what percussion is all about, is getting rhythm going. And so even though drums may be still concerning to some people here today, percussion and rhythm is very important to the whole picture of music.
Now, will we find at some point here in the next couple of weeks that we'll talk about percussion in particular, or is this a good time to talk about it, or what?
Well, let's hold it for now.
All right.
And talk about it. And I was explaining earlier to you, Mac, about the way that I see music. I see music as very important. People really are affected by music. But there's always controversy about it in the church.
Well, you said a great line. They're affected by it.
Yes.
That could mean they're offended, or they're what's the word I want? They're blessed by it.
Yeah.
So everybody, at some way or another, is somehow affected by the music.
Well, one of the things I think about music is that there are certain styles that people are attracted to. They like a certain kind of music, probably because they grew up with that kind of music. Yeah. And when they hear other forms of music, it's very distracting. It is something that they just don't handle well. And to me, that's very similar to the art world. There are certain styles of art that I like. There's some styles that I don't like as much, but I have a fairly open mind about artwork, because sometimes certain artwork affects people in different ways than others. And the same is true of music. Music is very different. You look across the spectrum of music, and you see all kinds of different styles of music. Well, that have been formed all the way through the history of the world.
It seems like we have become less offended by different musical styles than perhaps the generations before us. And I think of Elvis Presley.
Yes.
That when he was on the Ed Sullivan Show, they could not show anything down below the waist because he moved his pelvis.
Yes.
Elvis and his pelvis moved a lot, and a lot of people found it very offensive, especially moms and dads and even older than that. But it doesn't seem nowadays, especially in the world of gospel music or church music, that we're really not offended as much as perhaps we used to be.
Well, I hope that is the case. Not that there are not some limits. You know, we don't want religious music that actually moves our feelings and emotions away from God. We want to be drawn closer to Him, and music has a role in doing that. But there are many different styles, and I think as we talk together over the couple of weeks, we'll bring that out, and we'll talk about the importance of recognizing different styles and how people are affected in different ways.
My name is Mac McKoy. That's Pastor Delmar Austin, and this is The View From A Pew, a weekly radio and online content talking about theology. And we have a saying around here that if two people always agree, one of us isn't necessary. And I think that's why Delmar and I make a pretty good team, because we're in the same camp as Jesus is our hero. He's our Lord and Savior.
Amen.
Amen. But beyond that, we have different ways of worshiping. And so this next couple weeks, we're going to be talking about music. We always want to hear from you. You can email me at Mac, M-A-C, like macaroni, at The View From A Pew, and we'd love to hear from you. So where are we going to start out on music for this 2-week session?
Well, let's start in Revelation chapter 14. It's an introduction to a scene that where people are gathered together in heaven. There's no question. They're gathered together in heaven at the end of time. And this is, again, it's a symbolic picture, which we find in Revelation a lot, a symbolic picture of what things will be like when finally the plan of salvation is reached full fruition and those that are saved they're gathered together. And let me read it from Revelation 14, 1 through 3. Then I looked, and behold, a lamb standing on Mount Zion. No question there who that's talking about. And with him 144,000, having his Father's name written on their foreheads. These are those that are saved at the end times, and they are gathered together with Jesus on Mount Zion. Verse 2, and I heard the voice from heaven like the voice of many waters and the voice of loud thunder, and I heard the voice of harpists playing their harps. Interesting, musical instruments. Verse 3, they sang, as it were, a new song before the throne, before the four living creatures and the elders, and no one could learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. Now, if you look in Revelation chapter 7, you'll also see that this 144,000 group are those that came out of tribulation.
Right.
So they went through the tribulation on this earth, the very most difficult period of time before the return of Jesus. And then now they are in heaven, and they are enjoying the benefits of heaven, and they are doing what? They are singing a new song. And this new song is about the experience that they have just gone through. They have just gone through this experience that was so difficult that really tested their trust in God, their faith in Him. But God brings them through that, and now they are just rejoicing for what He has done.
Now, you mentioned something about angels and playing harps on clouds. Is that a biblical scene, a theological scene, or is that just kind of a legendary?
Well, it says it right here. I heard the sounds of harpists playing the harps. Doesn't specify angels there. Doesn't mean it wasn't angels, though,
Right.
just because it doesn't specify it. But there were harps played in heaven. Now, again, it's a symbolic picture, so we don't have to worry so much about all the literalism here. But it's a musical instrument, and the redeemed are playing are singing songs, right? Okay, there's music in heaven, and it has to do with this experience. And the new song is about what God did to bring them through this time of tribulation at the end of time, but also salvation now has been completed in their life. They've not only been saved by their faith in Jesus from the start, but now they've gone through one of the hardest experiences on earth, and they have been redeemed from heaven, and all those things are in the past. And so singing a new song is about that completed process of salvation in their lives. So what I'm saying is the Bible puts a very high value upon music. Music is an expression of what God has done. It is our joy, our thanks, but it comes out in forms of music. And that's the way it should be happening here in this world too.
I'm Mac McKoy. My co-host is Delmar Austin, Pastor Delmar Austin, and we're talking this week and probably beyond a little this week about the music in the church. Would love to have your input. You can email us at MAC, at theviewfromapew.com, and we'd love to hear from you. You know, I have a friend of mine here in town who comes on the radio every once in a while, and I've been to his church several times. No musical instruments. Now, they have a choir leader.
Yes.
And that person leads people in song.
Right.
So they sing, and they're pretty darn good at it, but they have no instruments for whatever reason. And I had never seen that before.
I wouldn't know why that would be the case for that particular church. However, there are some Christians who believe that musical instruments were not mentioned in New Testament times.
But they're right there. How can they not be? I mean,
well, this is of course a heavenly scene that's being brought out. But their point is musical instruments were not mentioned in the worship that took place in New Testament times. Well, that's true, but at the same time, church buildings are not mentioned in New Testament times because there weren't. They just met in people's homes or they met in some gathering place.
Right.
So that to me is not reason that you can't have musical instruments in worship.
And that's the battle we have in church all the time. Is it's going to be what the culture wants and help them to find Jesus through their culture, or is it the culture of the Bible and the original church that gets to have? And I don't mean the last word, but we'll go over this a lot here in the next couple of weeks, I'm sure.
Well, things have changed dramatically since the time of the early church, and we need to know what changes are good and what changes are not so good. But
well, and again, we love to hear your voice. It's Mac, M-A-C, at MC, or I'm sorry, it's Mac, M-A-C, at The View From A Pew, and we'd love to hear from you. Next couple weeks, it's all about music and all about worshiping God. I want to thank the good folks, of course, at DivineTruthChristianStore.com. Anywhere in the world, you can order from Divine Truth Christian Store, and that's DivineTruthChristianStore.com. 84th and Harrison here in Omaha on your keyboard in front of you.
Find Truth Christian Store, where you'll find more.
The comments heard on The View from a Pew are those of Mac McKoy and are not necessarily the opinions of his guests, his producer Garth, any one particular denomination or religion, the church lady, Mr. Lemke, Pastor Craig, or anyone else of sound mind and body. Now, here is today's The View from a Pew, heard all around the world on YouTube. Just search for The View from a Pew.
Good afternoon, I'm Mac McKoy, and this is the Wednesday edition of The View from a Pew here on your local radio station. Also on about 17 podcast sites, Podcast Index, Spotify, Pocket Cast, Amazon Music, Apple Music. We're just real blessed. Our producer Garth just got us on all these websites, so you can find it. And all you have to do is just go to your favorite website that carries audio on there. And, well, you can even do some on video because we're on YouTube also. But just ask for the View from a Pew, and they'll tell you how to find it on your podcast player or platform. And if they don't have us, for heaven's sakes, let us know, because we should be on most of them out there. And again, the way to reach out to me is Mac, M-A-C, at theviewfromapew.com. We're talking about music, worship music, and how the church has grown through different musical styles since Jesus was on earth.
One of the bottom lines about music, and particularly about religious music, is the effect that it has to inspire us as human beings. Do you remember Barry Manilow?
Oh, yeah, one of my favorites.
I
still have that double blue album.
Do
that
you?
was live. Oh, yeah. I love Barry Manilow.
Well, on that album, no doubt was I Write the Songs. Okay?
I write the songs.
Right. Well, I'm going to read these. I write the songs that make the whole world sing. I write the songs of love and special things. I write the songs that make the young girls cry. I write the songs. I write the songs. What was that about? It's about the inspiration. This is, he's talking about music itself, but people are inspired by music when they hear it. It touches their emotions. It reaches something in their heart that nothing else does. And inspiration is very important in the religious world. We need to be inspired as followers of Jesus Christ. And music is one of those things that helps to inspire us.
Now, isn't inspiration, though, a choice? I mean, if somebody says, I don't like today's contemporary music, I think we're following the culture too much. But yet, if you go into those churches and you see those congregants praising God and worshiping God, and whether their arms are in the air or they're just sitting there, you get that feeling that those people there are really enjoying this type of music at church.
Yes. Well, there are different kinds of music that affect people in different ways, and we'll be talking more about this. But even when people are listening to different kinds of music, they're being inspired. You talked about some people raising their hands, some people just sitting there. That's true. People are inspired in different ways, but all of it is about the importance of inspiration, of being inspired by just responding to what God is trying to do in our hearts. So music is a big part of that. I want to talk, Mac, about our inspirational moments in our lives today.
Okay.
So you think about some times, some musical experiences where you were really inspired. And let me give you an example to start out with.
Okay.
This was
because I got one in my head.
Okay, well, we'll give you a time, but let me start with this example. When several years back when I was pastoring a church in Wisconsin, I was helping out with a field trip. We had a Christian school, and there was a small number of of different schools that came together for a big concert to hear the University of Wisconsin marching band. They wanted to, expose children to band music, and so our school had the opportunity to be there, be a part of this experience of listening to band music. If you've never heard of the University of Wisconsin marching band, they have quite a history. They have been around for over 100 years. They have been one of the best known marching bands in the country. And part of it has to do with their leader, who was a leader, the band director for almost 50 years. His name was Michael LeCrone. And he just had an amazing way of getting that band to perform. When he took over at the University of Wisconsin, he said our physical training to be band members is just as important as the musical training that takes place. So he would have drills for all the band members to get in shape so that they could really carry out this music while they were active and going through all the motions that they did.
You're talking
as a marching band.
Physical shape.
Yeah, physical shape, right.
Well, that makes sense, especially if you're in marching band.
That's right.
Plus, you got to have a pretty good set of lungs to play a lot of those instruments.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't mind. That'd be okay.
Well, what he did, too, in this...
I'm going to play the flute, so I don't need too much exercise.
What he did was to... I think you do need quite a bit of lung power to play the flute, but what he did at this concert was... there was a big stage in front. The school kids are down there listening, and they go through several different musical numbers. On Wisconsin, of course, is one of their big numbers that they play. But then during another spot in the program, they start a musical selection, and the band members all take off while they are playing their instruments. They all take off from the stage. They leave the stage, and they go down the aisles of this big hall that we're sitting in, and they even go up in the second and the third stories. It's one of these concert halls, and they have to climb the stairs, and they're playing all the time, and you hear music throughout this whole cavernous building. And they just keep the music going, and they're going up and down the stairs. That carrying around an instrument like a tuba has got to be hard enough in itself going up and down stairs, but they're playing music, and it's band music where they're really keeping a beat going, and it's just amazing. So we're listening to all this music. We have a great day at this program, and then we take the kids home after that. I'm one of the drivers, so we're taking the kids back again. In our school, we had a school band.
Yeah.
And, a school band is kind of like other classes sometimes that, you have to try to motivate the kids to practice. You got to motivate them to really try and do a good job. They came back the most motivated that we had ever seen.
That's awesome.
After they heard this amazing band do everything, they came back and they were so excited about learning some new songs and trying new things. And I mean, that's inspiration.
Yeah.
That's what music ought to do for us. It ought to inspire us that way.
Why do you think music touches us the way it does? Because it obviously, it's part of the ears, obviously, yes. But it's also a visual because you're imagining in your mind what you're hearing, the theater of the mind, if you will, and that can make us eternally sad or eternally optimistic.
Yeah, that's one of the most obvious things about what music does. It touches the emotions.
Oh, yeah, big time.
It touches the emotions, and it has the ability to really inspire us.
Yeah.
So what is the musical experience that really inspired you?
Well, okay, now, when you said that, I tried to think of the first thing that I thought of, and I only saw this a few years ago. But it was Ann and Nancy Wilson, and their band was called Heart, and it was the Kennedy Center Honors Led Zeppelin, the group of Led Zeppelin. And so they did Stairway to Heaven, Ann and Nancy Wilson did, in the style that not only they did their music in, but that Led Zeppelin did their music in. And the drummer for Ann and Nancy Wilson's song here, Stairway to Heaven, was the son of the original drummer for Led Zeppelin. Wow. And I wept.
Yeah.
I mean, how unbelievable is that to have that young man there playing when his father is just right there? I didn't say deceased, did I? His father was in the booth. Yeah. So I don't know if maybe you don't like that song, but if you really want to hear something cool, go to YouTube and put in Ann and Nancy Wilson or Heart and Stairway to Heaven.
I've heard it before, but
it inspires me.
Yeah. One of the other stories, and I gave you kind of more of a secular story at first. One of the most powerful musical experiences that I had was not even dealing with Christian music. It was dealing with Jewish music.
Okay.
And what happened, it's all part of the experience. It's not just the actual music itself. But I was in Israel. You've been there in Israel.
Yep.
I was visiting there at the Western Wall.
Ooh.
And the Western Wall is a place for prayer.
Yeah, the Wailing Wall.
The Wailing Wall. But not only that, it is a place where the Sabbath is celebrated.
Right.
And on Friday night, they have large groups of Jewish men and women who come there, and they go through a lot of music and dancing as the sun sets and as the Sabbath begins. And I thought it would be very interesting to go down there and see what's happening. And so I'm down there and just wandering around. Mm-hmm. And the men and women are separate. The men
Yes.
are all together, and the men are singing and dancing. And it's a Jewish folk song, and they just have a circle, and everybody holds hands, and they continue around in a circle, dancing in a circle, and singing a song in Jewish.
Yeah, you see a lot of this when we have the Greek festival here.
Yes.
In Omaha, which is coming up, and they'll do that type of dance.
Yes. And I was enjoying it greatly. And they finish one song, and one of the men in the circle notices that I'm paying special attention to it, and he's beckoning
Oh,
me.
no.
And he's saying, join us, you know. And so I do. Now, I don't know any of the Hebrew words that they're using, but I hum along with it.
Yeah.
And I'm dancing and humming along as they're singing this great song. And it was just such a special, powerful way of experiencing this oneness with those in the Jewish faith, and a oneness for those who love God.
Yeah.
Who love God and want to serve God. Yes, we have some very different understandings of things, but I felt a real oneness that was there, and it was very inspiring to me.
Now, tomorrow on the radio program, I want to tell you an experience I also had in Jerusalem that was surrounded by song. I'm Mac McKoy. My co-host is Delmar Austin, and we thank the folks from DivineTruthChristianStore.com for sponsoring this worldwide broadcast. Anything you may need, DivineTruthChristianStore.com. Great people, and Jesus is always there.
Christian Store, where you'll find more.
The comments heard on The View From A Pew are those of Mac McKoy and are not necessarily the opinions of his guests, his producer Garth, any one particular denomination or religion, the church lady, Mr. Lemke, Pastor Craig, or anyone else of sound mind and body. Now, here is today's The View From A Pew, heard all around the world on YouTube. Just search for The View From A Pew.
Thank you, Emily. We are back, The View From A Pew. I was trying to figure out how many years we had done this, and we started it in '04, so it would be 19 years that we've done the View from a Pew, and very thankful to have this ministry and to have you being a part of it. Pastor Delmar Austin is my co-host every day, unless he's out gallivanting with his son running marathons, which I'm really happy for you because
Thank you.
You're over 60.
I am.
Okay, and you're running half marathons.
I still am at this point.
And your son runs full marathons.
He does.
Does he pick on you because you only run the half marathons?
You know, he is like my personal trainer.
Oh, okay.
Whenever I go to visit him, he tries to get me more in shape. It's like, come on, Dad, we got to run some more, and you got to develop your pace better. And he also supplies me. He works for a running store, a store where you have all the gear that you need to go running. And so he's always introducing me to new shoes, new running equipment. And
so you're like his biggest customer.
I am a pretty good customer. He gives me some stuff out from the running store that he buys and pays for. But it's really a very neat experience, and I like to stay active. I really do.
And what a great thing for a father and son to do.
It is.
You know, it's
fun to do together.
So for this week and next week, we're going to be talking about music and how we're impacted emotionally and in other ways by the music we hear, not just at church, but mainly church music. But it's the different styles, from gospel to folk to contemporary Christian to traditional hymns. And you were telling us a little bit of a story yesterday about how you danced with Jewish men,
yes,
at the Wailing Wall.
Yes,
I'm envious.
Well, it was quite an experience, and I wish I had known what I was singing. I didn't understand the Hebrew that they were singing in, but I knew that it was fitting because it is a prayer chant, really, that's happening, and there's just joy in their experience of knowing and following God.
Well, my last trip, I try to go every few years now because of my surgeries and everything. It's been a while. But we were there on Christmas Eve of 2016, and we were at the Church of the Holy Scepter. And that is the church that is actually saying that it's built on the place that Jesus supposedly was crucified. And there are only two places
buried,
yes. There are only two places that claim that in Jerusalem. And, of course, one is Gothica. Did I say that right?
Golgotha.
Well, all right, I was close. Not for you, though, I had to be exact. And then this place. Anyway, it's Christmas Eve. It's not busy. It's not a busy time there. And all of a sudden, we hear these people very slowly. We watch these people very slowly, kind of in choir robes, come down the hallway of this church, stone church. I mean, just it looks like it's from the Dark Ages, you know. And I didn't understand. It was in French, I later learned. It was in French, and I didn't know that. But pretty soon, I picked up on the tune. And it was a hymn that we would always sing, but of course we would sing it in English. When we got done, much like you, one of the people in the choir saw me because I don't know whether I was weeping or not. I spent a lot of time weeping in Jerusalem because it's an incredible place. But anyway, they got me between two of them in the middle, so you really couldn't see me very well. And we sang Amazing Grace, and they sang it in French, and I sang it in English. Yeah. And the number of people within that choir that came to me and were just so happy that they had heard it in English, and yet they were singing it in French. And it's another example of how worldwide music can be, whether you know the words and you don't know the song, or you know the music and you don't know the words. Yeah. Very moving.
You know, when we say that music is inspiring, it's not just making us feel emotional. Inspiring has to do with how it helps us to live our lives, to make right kind of choices, to move in certain directions. You remember the sound of music.
Oh, yeah. The hills are alive.
Right. Maria's out in the hills.
Yes.
But there's one key song that's in there, which is Climb Every Mountain.
Yeah.
And
What a classic.
The setup for it is that Maria is not doing real well there in the nunnery or the convent, and she is there before the head sister, or the mother that's over the whole group, and the song says, "Climb every mountain." This is the instruction that she's giving to Maria and saying, you need to reach out, climb every mountain, ford every stream, follow every rainbow until you find your dream. You need to be inspired to become who God meant you to be. And that to me is the value about what music does. It inspires us and it helps change our lives. It helps us to make the right kind of choices because we recognize the beauty of what God has for us.
Delmar Austin is my co-host today. As always, I'm Mac McKoy, and this is The View From A Pew, and you can email us at Mac, M-A-C, like macaroni, at theviewfromapew.com. You know, you mentioned something a minute ago. We are all gifted with different things, everything from hospitality to preaching to taking care of kids, music, etc. I just want to put this out, if I can gently say this. You probably don't have the gift of criticizing church music. God is not a God of confusion. Mm-hmm. And if I'm wrong, that's okay. But I don't think God would give someone the job to go into a church and complain about the music a lot. Now, if you don't like the music where you're at, God bless you for staying there, because that's no reason to leave. I used to have a friend of mine that came in after the music was over, first 3 or 4 songs. But remember, to so many people, that this song is a blessing. This music is a blessing. For some people, that's their worship. The message becomes a secondary. For me, the message was always the primary, but I enjoyed the music. So you brought up gifts, and I just wanted to let someone know who thinks God brought them into this world to be a church hymn critic. I don't think so.
Well, you know what we want to do as we talk about music is talk about what the Bible has to say about music. And it's interesting to me, when we go over all of these texts, the Bible doesn't really tell you what's right and what's wrong, what kind of musics to use, what styles of music to use. It just talks about music, and it talks about the blessing of music. And when you see that, you begin to realize that God uses music like he uses so many things in order to be a blessing in our life. Music ought to inspire us to follow God more faithfully and to recognize how good and loving that he is.
I think people would be really surprised if they knew how many of the lyrics that are in songs are actually verses in the Bible.
Yes, I think they would too.
I am always happy when I say, oh, that David said that in Psalms or Ecclesiastics or, whatever it is. But a lot of lyrics for music, even secular, comes from the Bible. So that's another way to respect that.
That's because from the beginning, many of the words that were written in Scripture were for the purpose of music.
Yes. Yeah. David played the harp and things like that, and he wrote the book of Psalms.
Yes, he did.
He probably wrote as many verses or lines or stanzas in Christian music and church music than anybody else. I mean, I love Paul, but I've never heard, I've got a thorn in my side and I can't figure it out. Oola, oola, oola.
There actually are a few New Testament songs that are using the words of Scripture and which do it very well. But David did write many of the great psalms that were intended as music. Now, if you look into Psalms, there are also other writers that wrote these lines. David was not the only one, but David did write the bulk share of the words and the music that are in the Psalms.
So
and most of those, Mac, the music is gone. We don't have that today, but the words we still have.
What do you mean the music's gone?
The actual melody that was sung along with some of these Psalms, we don't know for sure what it was. It's been lost to history.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. But we do have the words still, and so we can bring up new melodies, and we can put those words to new melodies.
You know, I always I'm a hummer. I just seem to be always humming or always singing. I know that the folks that sit in front of me at church will often say, you know, you just don't ever stop singing, do you? I think it's a compliment, but I'm never going to ask them. But I enjoy singing, and I'm always thinking I'm going to take this verse or that verse, and I'm going to put it with that song. Well, I know of a worship leader by the name of Jimmy here at a local church, and that's what he does. Yeah. He takes contemporary songs and puts Bible verses and stuff with them. And it's really enjoyable to hear the different kinds of ways people worship God through music.
You know, that's been done for a long time, for centuries, in fact, that different melodies are connected with religious words. And we're all blessed by it. In fact, a lot of the hymns we sing, we don't even realize that they came from secular churches.
Oh, yeah. Well, and part of that is, you know, we don't have hymnals anymore. We have words on the screen. And I'm okay with the words on the screen. Yeah. Number one, it gets you, you know, a little stretched out in the diaphragm, right, so you can sing better. But when you go back and look at those pages, you can see, when it was written and who wrote it and other songs. And some of that leads us to, well, that song's written by the same person this one song was written by.
Yes.
And I always enjoy that. All right, my co-host today is Delmar Austin. He is a retired pastor. I'm Mac McKoy. I'm a retired something or another. But we enjoy being with you here every afternoon on your local radio station at 4 o'clock Central Time. And then if you go on Facebook or you go on YouTube or some of those other places that have a visual as well as an auditory, you'll see our webcast. And that's what we're recording right now. The other thing is we're on podcasts all around the world, as many as we can, and we invite you to go to your podcast platform, put in The View From A Pew, and find this show and many others as podcasts on the internet. I'm Mac McKoy. I want to thank the folks at DivineTruthChristianStore.com. Anytime you need something, give them a call or look them up at Divine Truth Christian Store.
Divine Truth Christian Store, where you'll find more.
The comments heard on The View From A Pew are those of Mac McKoy and are not necessarily the opinions of his guests, his producer Garth, any one particular denomination or religion, the church lady, Mr. Lemke, Pastor Craig, or anyone else of sound mind and body. Now here is today's The View From A Pew, heard all around the world on YouTube. Just search for The View From A Pew.
Thank you, Emily, and welcome to the Friday edition of The View From A Pew at theviewfromapew.com. You can also find us at youtube.com and just search The View From A Pew. We're every place. I've got such a good producer. He's got us on about 18 podcast sites and several webcast sites. And Garth, we love you, and we thank you for all you do for this ministry. It's Friday, and we're talking a little bit about music and how it impacts the church and how it impacts you in the different kinds of the church. And today, when the program's over, I'm going to take a minute to challenge you for the weekend. it's been on my heart to do this, and I used to do it quite often on the radio, but haven't here in the last couple of months. So get ready if you want to have a challenge for the weekend to grow closer to God and a better witness to others. We'll talk about that as we conclude the program today here on The View from a Pew.
Okay, Mac, I want to talk today about what the Bible says about music. We've touched on that already, but today we want to do more of a survey and take a look at what all the Bible has to say. Where is the first spot in the Bible that it actually talks about music?
Well, I would assume it's in Genesis.
It is.
Okay.
And we only have to go to chapter 4 of Genesis.
Yeah.
To hear about a man that is born who is probably the great-grandson or great-great-grandson of Cain.
Yep.
And his name is Jubal. And Jubal is the first inventor of musical instruments.
You think that's where we get the word Jubilee?
Of course.
Okay.
Jubilee has
Well, I
to
thought
do
I was
with-
brilliant for thinking about it, but you knew, so.
Well, Jubilee has to do with celebration.
Yeah.
And, happiness, joy that's being brought forth. And that's what happens in the playing and the experience of music that takes place. But what that tells us, too, is music already at this point is very significant in human history. We only have a couple generations or 3 or 4 generations away from the creation of the earth, and there is already somebody that's making musical instruments in order to celebrate music and to be inspired by music and to enjoy this phenomena. So there is the introduction, a little piece that we get. Now, we really don't see music mentioned or referred to again until the book of Exodus. And Exodus, of course, is where the children of Israel have been in Egypt, and God sends Moses, and Moses leads them out by the mighty hand of God, leads them through the Red Sea, and the Red Sea collapses on Pharaoh's army. And it is at that point they realize now they're really free. Pharaoh can't come after them anymore and try to drag them back into slavery. So what do? After this experience takes place? They sing a song. They come up with a song that has to do with what just happened. The fact that God led them out of this land of slavery. He's leading them to this new land that he's going to give to them. And Miriam, Moses' sister, has got her tambourine along. And she's timbrel, it calls it in Scripture. And she is leading out in the music, and the women are leading out in the music that takes place. But all of Israel is joined together in singing this song about this experience that took place, and they're celebrating. This gives you a picture of what music is all about, what music is for, and that kind of joy and that kind of rejoicing needs to be taking place in religious settings where we realize that God is the one that leads us through all these difficulties that are part of this world.
You're listening to The View from a Pew, available on social media and also on your favorite local radio station. You can email us at MAC, like at theviewfromapew.com. Now, I think as I grew up, and I'm sure there were different cartoons or shows, but it always was David playing his harp on a cloud, sometimes before King Saul, and much to soothe his feelings.
Yes.
David wrote a lot, as we mentioned earlier, wrote a lot of psalms that also were turned into songs.
They were. David spends time as a shepherd boy. He said he spends time with the sheep out in the fields. And as he's doing that, most of the time they're grazing.
Yeah.
So what do you do when all the animals are grazing? He spends time writing music. He writes words. He writes melodies, no doubt, and he becomes accomplished on the harp. He's probably got a portable harp that he takes with him.
Yeah.
And so he's able to strum up some melodies. And he becomes so good at it that when he becomes known, this is after he has killed the giant Goliath, he is so well known by King Saul the King Saul says, hey, I want that young man to come and I want him to play music for me because Saul is a very emotional man. And he gets very angry and out of control sometimes. And he knows that he needs something, and this may have even been recommended by the people in the court, that understand Saul. They have David come in, and David plays music on his harp. He plays some of these psalms that he's written, while Saul is maybe in a tense mood, as a leader. There's got to be a lot of times that you're very anxious about things and about how things are going to happen. And so Saul's going through one of these times. David comes in, he begins to play his harp, and he begins to soothe Saul. Now, the problem with this is it lasts for a while, but it doesn't last very long because Saul is already jealous of David.
Yeah.
David has already done the big thing, which is to kill the giant Goliath. And so Saul is becoming envious of David. And there's one point where David comes in, he's playing his harp, he's trying to soothe Saul, and Saul just gets so frustrated. He grabs his sword, not his sword, his spear, and he throws his spear at David. He's trying to pin him up against the wall, and David ducks at the last minute, and it misses him, and he runs out. And from then on, there's animosity going on between David and Saul, which is not surprising, of course. But this is just an experience or a story in the Bible that helps remind us again about the good use of music. Music is something that can affect us in the right way and get our emotions collected and help us to have a more balanced approach to things.
Well, I remember when the Ark of the Covenant was brought into Jerusalem, David, once again, celebrates it with dance.
Yes, David is king by this time. He is now king of Israel. Saul is gone, and David's one great desire, is he wants to build a temple in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is his capital city now, and the temple of God ought to be here. And so one step in getting in that direction is the Ark of the Covenant is the most holy piece of furniture that was a part of the Old Testament sanctuary. He wants it now brought to Jerusalem. And so they go about a very complicated means of getting the ark there. And as it is coming into Jerusalem, David is there. I suppose he's gone out and he's met the ark at some point, and he is leading the way as the ark is coming into Jerusalem. He is singing and dancing because he is so excited about what's happening. And the part of the story that a lot of people remember is his wife, who is the daughter of King Saul, looks down at David, and she is disgusted with him. Because as he's dancing, he has to, these are long robes that they wear, and he's got to pull up his robe in order to dance around so he doesn't trip over it. And she says, "What are you doing? You're the king. You're exposing yourself in front of all these people. You are an embarrassment to me." And King David says, "Listen, gal, if you're going to talk to me like that, you're at the back of the harem, and I'm never going to speak to you again." She kind of gets hers for treating David that way.
Yeah.
But here is David celebrating. This is what music is about as he is leading the Ark of the Covenant in.
Well, and when we get to 2 Chronicles, we have perhaps one of the first orchestra and choir together, and that's for the dedication of the temple.
Music is very developed at this point.
Yeah.
As we're going through history, as we're going through time, but even the Levites that are involved in taking care of the temple, when the temple is built by Solomon, then the Levites are responsible for all the worship that takes place there. So they create a choir and they create an orchestra of these instruments that have been already developed in time. And when the temple is dedicated, I mean, there must have been a huge concert that took place that was just very powerful. I mean, there were hundreds of singers, hundreds of people in this orchestra, and it was an amazing thing.
One of the things that was always on my bucket list was I wanted to direct a choir and an orchestra at the same time. And years ago, back where I was living in Des Moines, I got to do that as a guest radio talk show host thing. And it is much harder than I ever imagined it would be. One of the choir members came up to me afterwards and said, "You know what was great about having you up there? We didn't have to follow you. We knew what we were doing." Great. Thanks a lot. But yeah, music is important to all of us. Now, we're at a Friday here, and we're to the end of the program for today, but we've got a whole week more to talk about some of the important things about music and the Bible. Give us a rough draft of some of that.
Well, we're going to continue to look at what the Bible has to say because we're just going through the Old Testament here, and there's some more things that we could say about it. We've talked about how Psalms is really a song book.
Yeah.
It's a book of different hymns that were used in a special way. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll talk about what happened in the New Testament too, because music is always important in connection with worship.
Yeah.
It is to help inspire us to do the right things.
Well, that brings me to kind of an important thought I wanted to share with you today. I used to talk a lot on the radio about forgiveness because that's the ministry that God gave me to protect and share at the same time. And if you are a man and you want somebody to walk you through a time of forgiveness, I'm more than happy to do that for you. And you just get a hold of me, Mac, at the View From A Pew. It's not a money thing. It's just helping men. But it starts out with realizing a resentment. Everybody will go to bed tonight with some type of resentment. They may have to think hard, or it may just sit on the top of their head. But today, when you think about that resentment, I want you to spend the weekend and think about forgiving that person. Remember, forgiveness is not for them, it's for us. And sometimes that's hard to understand, but it's why Jesus died on the cross. So we could spend eternity with him. And unfortunately, or fortunately, no matter how you look at it, part of that sanction, part of that being sanctified and going to glory with Jesus is to forgive people. So this weekend, think of your resentments and work on forgiving people. I'm Mac McKoy for the good folks at DivineTruthChristianStore.com. Thanks for listening to The View From A Pew.